G'day, Michael here. I found myself with the fact that I have the Delta printer, which has one set of characteristics for the print head, and my smaller Prusa, which has a different characteristic for the print heads, and of course the Black Widow, which is a big Prusa style printer, and it has its own set of characteristics. I found that the profile management in Slicer is a little bit too simple. Let's just get a Slicer running. Now, with any of these Linux desktop environments, you have the ability to set up multiple desktops. And this guy I'm running, how many was there? About eight desktops. Now I'm just going to go to a clear one. You can see where the mouse pointer is. Click on that, and that gives me a clear desktop. So I'm just going to launch Slicer. Now I'm logged in here as the user Michael. If I want to add a part, let's just grab one. I don't know, it really doesn't matter what I'm doing. That'll do. Okay, so we've got a part here, and with the, I'm trying not to shake too much, I can choose which printer I have. I have multiple printer profiles. Let's say I pick, I don't know, where are we? The TiVo with a 0.8mm tip. That sounds all well and good. I'm waiting for it to change. But I also found I have to, oops, sorry. Gee, I'm trying not to shake here, but it's just not working. Okay, so I've got here the printer settings. I find that I'm using the filament settings, have to also have the printer setting kind of with it. To just simply choose ABS or PLA or whatever, I end up with too many variations. Like in the printer settings here, I'll just gotta listen to me, it's busy doing infill. Okay, so I end up with this massive list of profiles to cope with both the different materials and the different characteristics of the print head, and of course I'm finding, because I'm printing such a varied type of product, one minute I'm producing something that needs to be quite high in tensile strength, so it has to be quite solid. The next part has to just basically occupy a space, so it doesn't really matter if it's very empty, and doesn't matter how fragile it is. And the next part I might be producing has to have like a kind of a knock resistance, but otherwise lightweight. So, you know, for the different structures you need, you end up with another profile as well. So, for argument's sake, here I've got ABS precise for ducting. The ducting didn't use an infill. I have nothing but perimeters to make up the ducting components, because you don't really want to infill a circular tube. You want to just have it nicely printed. So everything's optimized for not only the printer and the material, but also for how the product works. So I found this really mind-boggling, and I was prone to picking the wrong parameters when I went to the plate. It seems like a good idea. I pick which profile, and so forth, and that seems to be a logical way of doing it. I can't criticize this method, but I found that, if nothing else, I was making too many mistakes. So what I've come up with is a method using the talents of my operating system, which is, I'm running Linux. Well, I have to zoom out a long way to get the 4K monitor in. I'm using Linux, and I'm using the Mate desktop, M-A-T-E desktop, and the talents that I'm using aren't really universal across the different desktop environments. Linux lets you use many different types of desktop environments, but they all have this kind of functionality where you can choose multiple desktops. Well, all that I've come across. I've tried about 20. Have multiple desktops, and also Linux is fundamentally a multi-user interface, like any decent Unix environment. So what I did was actually set up a user. I've called one Delta, and Prusa, and TiVo. So they're my three names. And what I've done, right now, this one's what I call the Delta. I've got the SD card out of there, in my card reader. And what I have got going is, I've got, coming into here, my first desktop, which I'll click on that, is set up. Well, there's my social media and basically internet business. Then my email, So this first desktop's got my internet and email. The next one I've got Slicer running as the user Delta, right? So the user Delta has got Slicer running, and that's the file that it's working on. Now on the next desktop, click on that, I have Slicer running as the user TiVo. So I'll just go to the plater so you can see what I'm up to. Okay, and that's the piece that's in the machine right now. You can see the print bed. Okay. Now on the next desktop, I have Slicer running as Prusa with a different design. Now let's say I want to export that file to G-code. Now Linux, I'm finding I haven't. Maybe there's a way of getting around this, but I haven't got there. The user Michael has got permissions to use the USB storage device, right? But the other users somehow, for whatever reason, aren't able to use it. Maybe there's something I'm missing. In any case, I'm leaving that in the too hard basket for the moment. But what I've got here, Slicer defaults to saving files like this, to kind of where you read it from. But what we can do is set up Slicer to do something different. So I'll go File, Preferences. Now, what's important is set this as expert mode and remember output directory. Now what happens now, that's how I've set it, but I haven't actually exported a file, so I'll do that now. And I've set up in the 3D printing folder a folder called G-codes. Now I'm using this as a user Prusa, right? So its output folder is going to be this desktop. Now there's no file saved here at this moment, so this will be my first file. Now that setting with remember output file folder, every time, regardless of where I get a file from, it's going to be putting it to that output folder. Now let's go to the next desktop. We're on, where are we? We're on number 4. I'll go to number 5. And what I've got this desktop set up as is basically my file manager. So here I've got, you can see, Michael Desktop Server 3D Printing G-Codes Delta. So this folder is showing me the output folder for the user Delta. This one here is showing the output folder for the user TiVo. And this one here is showing me the Prusa. Now because it's a network drive, I'll just do a refresh. And there's our nut.gcode we just saved. Okay. Now I actually went through and formatted the SD card. Now you can see it's labelled Delta. So that's to wake me up that I'm not going to put the wrong file onto the wrong SD card. So I don't want that one. What I'll do is I'll eject that. One more. Okay, it's been ejected. Sorry about this tangle of wires here. So I'll take that SD card out, which belongs in the Delta. Take the SD card out of my Prusa. Now I'm not sure whether I formatted this one, but I guess I'll find out. If I haven't, I'll do it in front of you. Okay, SD card's in. That's still labelled as a Nikon D60. So I'm going to use Application, Accessories, Discs. Now, it's the 16 gigabyte device. So I'll click on that. I'll format the partition. All I really care about is making a name there. So now I'm going to call this one, caps lock, P-R-U-S-A. Only takes a second anyway. Format. Yep, let's do that. Okay, so it'll take a few seconds to do its thing. And there it's appeared. So now I've got that SD card labelled Prusa. Now it doesn't matter if you're using Windows, it does the same sort of thing with formatting. Now I'm using this whole window for file management. So now I can see the Prusa is the device I'm looking at. Right? So I'll grab that nut G code and drop it onto Prusa. Eject. Oops, there we go. Up here it should say that it's safe now anytime. It normally does. Oh, didn't do that. In any case, it's ejected. Alright, so I'll get that. I'm probably shaking you like mad, so forgive me for that. But it's the concept, I have to be too dynamic here. So I'll put that in the card reader. And hey presto, we should be able to print from S. Oops, right, wrong way. SD card. And there you have it, nut.g code. So, I'm not going to run that right now, but there it is, it's in the machine. Okay, so going back to the Delta, which I only managed to get online all of a sudden today. I'm going to grab that card out of the Delta. Same process. Very hard to do this one-handed. Give me a second. Okay, so I've got the card back in there. Alright, so what have I got in the Delta? The Delta folder has not got the file I'm looking for, so I'll go to the desktop that had the Delta on it. That's the first one. There. Okay, now I've got this part. Now because I'm, as the user Delta, now Linux can use, it can have like 200 users on at the same time, all running software, so it's quite a nice little setup. In another video I'll show actually how this is done, but I just want to show the concept. So I'm as the user Delta, I'll export the G code, and I'll just go save. And it's remembered that I am aiming to save it to the Delta folder. It's got an older version, yeah, I'll replace that, that's fine. Now I'll go to that desktop where I'm doing the file management. Where's my Delta? Up here, so I'll just do a refresh. We've got the vice script. Oh. Now I've just clicked on that, and my Python script has just given me an estimate. Now that estimate includes a warm-up time allowance of about 10 minutes. Okay, so I'll just go to my Delta SD card, drag and drop. Okay. Okay, so that's been ejected. Okay, so the SD card's in there. Print from SD. There it is, ViceScript 102. Oh, I better stop that, it's going to collide. Now I have these glass plates. As soon as this glass plate comes out, it'll cool down pretty quickly. So as this cools down, those parts will come loose. I've just got to get another plate, give me a second. Now I've just put my 20% cross-link PVA slurry. As that dries, it tends to separate a little bit, but it gets to a point where it is much more spreadable, and it dries so thin that it almost leaves no texture whatsoever on the product. And I can reuse the cross-link PVA for many prints, and I'm hoping, this is an ABS filament, I'm hoping I can print this part, which is about 130 across and quite high. I'm hoping I can just print that here without too much fuss. It's just about coming to the point where I can spread around a little bit better, but it seems to be behaving quite nicely anyway. I might actually just leave that to heat. What often happens if there's a small trace of oil, you get these little areas there it pulls away. So I'll see what happens there. In any case, I better just check that my settings were in fact correct for the ABS on this area. So I go to the Delta one, and all I'm concerned about is the filament settings. Yeah, that should be acceptable for this lot. I could bump up that heat a bit higher, or maybe I should. Yeah, I'll bring that up to 100. Okay, now what I could do is save it, and if it's related to a particular part, I might just put, might call that vice. So printing this particular part, I've got an ABS setting and vice, but all the printer related settings have remained constant. Now this one here is, what have I got here? Oh yes, I was fiddling with that, and I'm happy with that as my basing. I'm still moving into this setup, so I'm still finding my feet a little bit. I just call it normal, that'll do fine. Okay. Just about, no, it's still liquid. I'll get some heat into it. Okay, so while I pause the video, I actually changed that temperature, as you remember, in the slicer. Of course, saved it, got it onto the SD card. It's been running for a couple of minutes just to heat up. So it's heading for 100 degrees like I just set, and it's at about the 66 degree mark. Unfortunately, it takes a while to get the thing heated up to the 100 degree mark, so I have to just wait. I'll come back to this shortly. In any case, that other part that I took out, the plate's cooled and the ABS is broken away nicely. You get the reflection right, and you can see it's quite a smooth surface there. Must have been a bit of a dag underneath there, something there for some reason. Alright, anyhow, the underside's smooth, the edges are printed quite well. Now, I had a friend here, and when I was printing this and I showed off, the first probably, well, about 10mm, you can see a change in the finish there. Some of that's to do with that hole, but it's already printing in the order of, I think, what was it, about 60mm a second, maybe even 80mm a second, and that was at the 100% feed rate. And just showing off, I wound the speed right up to 244%, so that would be, you know, getting close to 200mm a second on this small part. And it really produced almost no quality loss. It started getting to a point where the filament was changing a little bit. So if you look at that, and this is only a small part, so it really does show up. You can see how there's a small finish change, but it's not like, oh my god, it's just wrecked. You can see the finish change there. And that's basically it. It pretty much conformed to the shape, even at the crazy high speed. So the Delta is quite an incredible, you know, for motion wise, it's such an impressive printer. Now, there's, considering, you know, I went from like about 60mm a second to getting close to 200mm a second, there's almost no quality change. It's madly impressive. And, you know, that hole's pretty circular. It's not, you know, let's see if I can get vision through it. That hole's pretty nice and circular, if I can hold it right. In any case, adequate for what I'm doing. And its partner, of course, it had the same speed change. Now, I'm not sure where that bit of fur is actually from, the fact there's a hole there, and it was jumping between parts. I think it was probably a string left over from jumping between parts at that layer, because it doesn't, the speed actually didn't affect the other side, so interesting. Alright, so as you can see, it's a tiny part, but done at a crazy speed, it's still printed well, so it's quite impressive. Alright, now you saw the glue going on that glass plate. I have 3 glass plates, all at, you know, various stages. This is one I have to basically clean the coating off and recoat, but it's okay for doing little prints that I don't care about too much. That one's got a good coating on it. As you can see, it's near invisible, and that one's, you know, waiting to be heated. 100 degrees is a bit of a slow target, so I just have to wait and let it be. In any case, what this video is really about for the moment is showing how I'm managing multiple printers in a way that I don't get confused. All I have to remember is the SD card, which is labelled by the printer name. Everything's saving on a directory on the server to its own folder for each printer, and we've got the printer name here. I've set up users on the system. I'll just users and groups. Make the window bigger. No, okay. So you can see here I've got Delta, Michael, Prusa and Tivo as users. Right. Now the way to execute a program as like I don't have to log out and log back in again to use the other programs. All I need to do is run a program called GKSU. Oops, lowercase. GKSU. Some parameters. -W. I don't know whether I use W, but it's basically sets up that I'm changing across as if I was the other user completely within the window. And which user am I going to be? I go, so it's -u, and the username, let's go Tivo for fun. And what do I want to run? Firefox, let's try that. So GKSU, -W, -u, Tivo, Firefox. Now what that should do is it should ask me for the password for Tivo, and then once I've done that, it will get me on as Firefox. There's another advantage to this system, like let's say we're using Firefox. If you're working on a website as the admin to the website, but you want to browse it as a lay user, being on as a different user means you'll have completely different credentials. You may as well be on a different computer on another side of the world. It makes no difference. You're completely unrelated to, one Firefox is running as a completely different user to the other. So I press enter. Any time now, it's asking me for the password, which I'll type in. Any second now, we should see Firefox come up. There we go. And Tivo has never used Firefox on this computer before, so everything's just blank behavior. If I go plus, open another tab, there's nothing in my history, so it's a completely new user. Whereas the user Michael has got quite a lot going on in Firefox. If I click on plus, you can see there's quite a few things in here in the history. So I can go to various websites. I don't know, let's go, hello, how about YouTube? There we go. So I go to YouTube. Michael's got that history, and he's logged on as the administrator of that page, whereas Tivo is nothing to anybody because he's never used Firefox before. Okay, so by using the machine as a completely different user, all my settings are completely unique for each user, and that's how I'm simplifying the actual use of Slicer. I'll close that, I don't need that. So each one of these slices, this one is the user Delta, this one is the user Tivo, and this one is the user Prusa. And it's actually shown here that we're using it as Prusa instead of using it as Michael, who I'm basically logged in here as. So I'm simultaneously using this as 4 different users, so the slicer is set up specifically for each different printer as a completely different user. So in effect it's like having a separate computer in effect for each printer. So the configuration and everything is just, it's very simple and clean to follow. So when I go changing some settings, here I haven't really set up anything, so everything's just default. But let's go to Tivo. What settings do I have here? I've got very few settings because I don't need them. And what I'll end up with, of course, is a couple of different filament settings, a couple of different density settings, and a couple of different like design related settings. So it'll be probably about 9 different parameters for Tivo, and probably about the same for the other 2 printers. So it'll be a manageable number, whereas I was just seeing, trying to run everything from one slicer as just growing exponentially in complexity, and sure enough I'd be forgetting things. Well, I hope that long-winded video is of use to you. Feel free to like, share, subscribe, ask a question, leave a comment. Bye for now.